to go straight to the man who makes sense of it all, or tries to, and that would be Jonathan Sacerdoti, i24 News European correspondent. And Jonathan, you know, I'm not going to give you the laundry list again of just the resignations and labor, you know, falling apart, and nobody really knows what's going to happen. But today the European Union Parliament is meeting. What is expected in that meeting? And it's not boding well for Britain because the EU wants it out immediately, doesn't it?
That's right. Mr. Cameron is on his way to Brussels, where he will meet European leaders for the first time. And just talking about the economics there, another important voice chimed in as well yesterday, Mervyn King, the former Bank of England governor, who's actually come out and said that he found some of the claims of the Remain camp before the referendum took place to be quite shocking. He said he was travelling around the UK a lot at the time and was struck by how many people said to him they didn't like the scaremongering tactics, they didn't like to be told that if they were to vote to leave, they would be idiots. And sure enough, that's the result that came out. And Mr. Cameron is now having to deal with that when he does go to Europe, where he has said yesterday that this Article 50, which is officially the process by which the negotiation starts, limited to 2 years for any member state to leave the EU, he said that won't be triggered until there's a new Prime Minister and a new leader of the Conservative Party, which will be around 3 months. Of course, Europe isn't particularly happy with that, leaving uncertainty for that period over what it is Britain is going to try to negotiate. And that's perhaps what will be discussed at that very awkward dinner tonight.
A very awkward dinner, and simultaneous to that, people going taking out to the streets in the UK today, demanding actually to remain in the European Union?
Well, of course, there are those who are demanding to remain, but there's absolutely no political support for that because it has been put to the people through a plebiscite, a referendum, and the people did choose in favour of leaving. Now, most politicians have respected that. They've said, even those who were campaigning to remain within the EU have said, we put this to the people and we will trust what the people have told us. There were all sorts of discussions, though, daily, especially driven by some parts of the media, of how this could be ignored, and also some legal advice that it would be rather tricky to actually enact this because there is an Act of Parliament which has Britain within the EU, and that will need to be repealed, and that's something a Prime Minister might not be able to do all on their own. They may need the support of Parliament, which means MPs will have to vote on it, which means that we'll have to find out what MPs think. However, it would seem startlingly undemocratic for MPs to completely ignore a very high turnout poll of all the people in the country. So there is this dilemma there. Perhaps what will happen is that during those negotiations, as it becomes clear what it is that Britain will be asking for, some sort of half-leave, half-remain version of Britain's status will be arrived upon and negotiated so that there is a leave, but officially Britain keeps certain parts of the deal, which might not satisfy all of those.
I know, I mean, they would hope for that in the very short time that we have, Jonathan, but why would the EU go for that? I mean, at the end of the day, there seems to be this notion that the EU wants to just make this, you know, don't leave because this is what's going to happen to show to other countries, no?
And sure enough, that's the concern, that the EU would like to punish Britain or make an example of Britain to other states who are already talking about possibly having their own referendum. But all of that can only really be known when the negotiating starts. And Mr. Cameron has already thrown that into the long grass and said that it won't be until there's a new leader.
And which will be somewhere around the fall. But again, we'll be dealing with it probably heavily till then. Very fascinating information on that from Jonathan Sacerdoti. Thank you for joining us this morning.